You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 27th of March 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist, in association with UBS. Bonjour, this is The Globalist, broadcasting to you live from 16 Rue Bachemont in Paris. I'm Georgina Godwin. On the show ahead...
We have to take a greater share in tomorrow's security guarantees in Ukraine, and we have to take more autonomy in our capabilities.
Emmanuel Macron, who's hosting a Ukraine coalition summit here in Paris today, will examine the agenda and look at the outcome of the Ukraine ceasefire talks in Saudi Arabia too. The show today is coming to you from Paris, and I'll have our editor-in-chief, Andrew Tuck, in the studio to tell you why. We'll have a look through the papers and hear about Art Basel Hong Kong, and then we'll meet an entrepreneur who's changing the face of business education. Plus... That was Give Me Bass, a bit of a track by DJ Anais Condado, who's going to pop in to tell us more about the nightlife of this splendid city and how she's helping to make it a safer space in which women can work. And finally, Sophie Grove, the editor of Konfekt, will be here to walk us through the spring edition of our sister magazine. That's all here on The Globalist, live from Paris. First, a look at what else is happening in the news. The editor of The Atlantic magazine has shared the full transcript of the messages he received as part of a military group chat of senior White House officials. US President Donald Trump has ramped up his global trade war by announcing 25% tariffs on all auto imports into the United States. And Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is expected to announce a federal election tomorrow. Do stay tuned to Monocle Radio throughout the day for more on those stories. Now, last night, French President Emmanuel Macron hosted Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at a working dinner at the Élysée Palace. Today, the men will meet again, joined by 29 other nations, for a coalition of the willing summit to finalise security guarantees for Kyiv. Well, I'm joined now in the studio by Francis Collings, who is a foreign news correspondent based here. Francis, many thanks for coming into the studio. It's not much of a hardship, is it? Gorgeous cafe, lovely space.
It is utterly beautiful.
Tell us more about this coalition of the willing.
Well, this is effectively the second meeting. We saw one earlier this month in London. That was led by UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Interesting that Britain seems to be suddenly an influential partner when it comes to European politics again under Starmer, and with the backdrop of Ukraine. It's basically trying to achieve some sort of coalition of thought, what to do when it comes to Ukraine and getting everybody on board. And of course, it's been accelerated by Trump being back in the White House for a second term, and all the very clear signs coming from the Trump administration that Europe needs to do more, be it either NATO spending, which a lot of countries are ramping up, of course, or just coming to some sort of idea about what's going to happen in Ukraine. And the points of debate, obviously, are whether boots on the ground is something that is feasible. And ahead of this coalition of the willing, there have been words coming out from various camps that obviously President Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer have spoken about putting troops on the ground in some sort of scenario. Others not so happy. Clearly, of course, because they fear that it could lead to a wider conflict and a conflict against Russia.
So this meeting today is pretty significant. What's the likely outcome?
Well, I think they know they've got to get their skates on, effectively. They're going to have to come up with something which is concrete, and that isn't always the easiest thing to do, as we know when we look at European politics. It's being driven, obviously, by Macron and Starmer, as mentioned. They have some very, very firm ideas. Last night, Macron announced a €2 billion military package, which encompasses everything from missiles to armoured cars. He's upping the ante, along with Zelensky, of course. But it's a case of I think it comes down to the wording, what they come out with later on. Are they going to meet again, or is there going to be some sort of idea as to how they can step forward? And a lot of this, of course, dependent on what is going on in Washington, D.C.
Absolutely. I mean, this is obviously a completely different approach to Washington's policy of appeasement and their decrease in military funding. Can Europe achieve this without US support?
No, not really. They need to have an agreement with the Americans. And interestingly, when Trump's advisor, Stephen Witkoff, was in Moscow the other day, he was somewhat critical of the European plans. I think he called it posturing at one stage. So there is this twin-track development going on. There was a moment a few days ago, you may have seen, where Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, was picked up the phone from Emmanuel Macron and said, "Can you hang on 20 minutes? I'm doing something. I'll call you back." And then happened to sort of say later, "Yes, we speak most days." And Macron's spokesman said, "Well, Macron is speaking to Starmer and also to Trump most days as well." So while we do have this twin-track diplomacy going on, the Europeans getting together, the Americans talking directly to Russia, it's also very clear that they are talking to each other, communicating. Whether it's on Signal, I don't know. That's another story for you to cover later. But I think they're going to have to sort of come to some sort of understanding. But the backdrop is, of course, the unpredictability of what happens in Washington, D.C. at the moment.
And the fact that they really are pulling funds.
Yes. I mean, last night was an interesting development because Zelensky was on TV, broadcast live all across Europe. The European Broadcasting Union put him out and had four well-known journalists sitting opposite him answering questions. He didn't say too much that was really outstanding, but he did talk about the intelligence, for example, that they need the US intelligence, and without that they can't defend themselves against missiles. Funding is another issue. Funding, obviously if they still have American funding, or if they still have something coming from America, that's very important. That can be replicated in other areas, it seems, is the European perspective. But when it comes to precise intelligence of where the missiles are going, what they're doing, he says they are effectively dependent on it. He was actually asked, will the Americans stay strong? It was put to him directly. And of course, bearing in mind what happened a couple of weeks ago in the White House when he was there, he was quite diplomatic. He said, well, let's see, I hope so.
Let's look at what America's doing, because of course they've got talks going on at the moment in Saudi Arabia. What's the latest from there?
Well, I think we have to see this as the beginning of a scenario that hopefully will lead to peace at some stage. The Black Sea Initiative means that at least they're going to be starting there and not attacking each other in the Black Sea. The fact that Ukraine have had, I wouldn't say dominance, but a great deal of success in the Black Sea may be part of that. Soon after we get word from Riyadh, of course, missiles are still flying. Both sides are saying that you can't trust the other side when it comes to an agreement. But it may be an unpalatable fact, but I think the Ukrainians are probably aware that somewhere down the line, probably with the nudging of the United States, there's going to have to be an agreement on territory, like we've seen in history down the years. A country is going to be losing territory, either permanently or on a temporary basis. And if you think in our lifetime, we've seen the end of countries like Czechoslovakia and East Germany, things can change, borders can change and people can lose territory that can come back. Can we see Crimea, for example, being returned to Ukraine in the short term? I don't think so. Doesn't mean to say it couldn't happen in 20, 30 years' time. I
mean, the security implications for Europe are huge if Russia is allowed to keep the land it's gained.
I think so, but does Europe think that Russia will actually stop there? Is the Russian economy in such a position to actually mount further attacks on Europe? I mean, obviously one of the partners in the coalition of the willing is Poland, that has a great deal of concerns bordering Ukraine and being very involved in what is going on with Russia. Does Russia want, after this 3-year war that's been devastating, to actually attack? The point is made, and it's made often by Zelensky, made last night, that Putin's prime aim is to drive a wedge between the United States and Europe. And he seems to do that quite skillfully. Now, it's a school of thought. It's arguable that in Donald Trump in the White House, he's got someone who can help him in driving that wedge. But as we say, the unpredictability of the White House means you never really know which way Trump is going to jump at the end of the day.
So the focus today is back here in Paris, where this big meeting is going on. I wonder if this is a win for Macron. I mean, he's long pushed for much more robust security within Europe. I wonder if it gives him more diplomatic clout, particularly as the German government takes a step back, well, for the moment at least.
Well, I think the German government will be taking a step forwards in the months to come, as we've seen with the incoming Chancellor. Macron has been, you're right, saying, I think he described NATO as being brain dead about 5 years ago, and he's been always wanting to create a European military alliance. Interestingly, just as someone who's been living here for the last couple of years, Macron always seems to appear much better on the international diplomatic stage. He seems to be more comfortable than he can be domestically. But there were polls last week saying that his ratings were rising domestically simply because of what is perceived as being prescient and successful on the diplomatic stage, having relations with Donald Trump. And let's not forget, he also did have at one stage very good relations with Vladimir Putin. He invited Putin to France in 2017. He wanted to establish a bond, and there was a documentary last year that showed him on the telephone before Putin invaded Ukraine, trying to persuade him to step away. So he is someone who has been known to work the phones, to have good diplomatic relations on both sides, but he does always seem to be, in my eyes, just a bit more comfortable when it comes to walking the international stage.
And finally, just another look at this press conference, because it was very wide-ranging. He spoke for a long time, Zelensky. Was there anything else of note?
Not really. I mean, there was nothing that sort of leapt out at me. There was certainly none of the drama we saw 2 weeks ago at the White House. There was something that came out, was it in the press conference or perhaps a bit earlier? Traditionally, leaders go to the White House. They take a president for the American leader. This happens everywhere. He took the belt held by Alexander Usyk, the world boxing champion, who's from Ukraine, and that was on a table next to him in the White House, which he was going to give to Donald Trump. The week before, you may recall, Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, had given him an invite from the King to go on a state visit. In all the row that was going on, this belt was left somewhere in the White House, and he was asked, do you know where the belt has gone? And he said, I'm not entirely sure, because, of course, they left the White House quite quickly. So there was no real main lines, apart from, I think, being pressed, can you trust the United States? And I think he's probably learned, even though I think he's been diplomatically superb over the last 3 years, I think he's learned to keep his counsel when it comes to the US, because we don't know which way it's going to go.
Absolutely. Francis, thank you very much indeed. That's Francis Collings there. And this is The Globalist. It's 9:13 in Kyiv. That's 8:13 here in Paris. Now, Macron and Zelensky were not the only ones out to dinner in Paris last night. Here in the studio, we were joined by the elite club of Monocle patrons for a delicious meal in our wonderful new space. And I'm joined now by Monocle's editor-in-chief, Andrew Tuck. Andrew, good morning to you. I'm surprised you're looking so fantastically well. It was quite late and, well, let's just say some alcohol was consumed.
It was an amazing night. My voice may be a little bit deeper this morning. But
who and what and why are Monocle patrons?
So obviously you can take a subscription for Monocle and you'll get the magazine sent to you. But a couple of years ago we started, by word of mouth almost, a programme called The Patrons. And this is a higher price you pay, but we make sure you get sent every single thing we do. So it's every book, every piece of print that we do. But importantly, we also find some touch points across the year where we bring you into the fold. So last year, after we did the Quality of Life conference in Istanbul, for example, we took a group of patrons away for a couple of days. We went to Bodrum, we went to an amazing beach club, had fun, but also began to connect these people together in interesting ways. So fascinating just hearing your last interview. Last night, one of our patrons had come from Kyiv, and talk to our patrons about what was happening in the city. Now, all the tough things, but he pointed out, that there's an explosion in real estate investment because people can't take the money out of the country. He showed me his phone during the evening with the alerts for incoming drone attacks. So these people are all fascinating. They've all elected to be connected to Monocle, and they use Monocle as a way, as a bit of social glue between them as well.
I found it amazing meeting them, and they really had come in from all over the world. I did, possibly after a couple of glasses of wine, make one promise, which was to say somebody's name on air.
Let's do it, because we're doing shout-outs now this time. George.
Next we'll be taking requests. But it was wonderful to meet Salvatore Santoro.
Well, we like Salvatore. So, again, it's interesting when you're a brand, the relationship you have with somebody. So he identifies himself as an issue 4 person. So he started his relationship with Monocle all the way back then. He came to that very old office that used to be in Boston Place in London. He's one of the smartest dressed gentlemen you've ever seen. A great suit, funny, entertaining, has lived around Europe, has a knowledge of so many things. So again, what's wonderful for us as editors, as journalists, is you just have to listen to these people's stories, and you also come away informed, engaged. Everyone, we had people who are in finance, in public relations, in government, all here last night. A big producer of fabric from Turkey came, talking about what's happening in Turkey as well. So we just got this rapid briefing, as you said, matched with rather a lot of nice food, and certainly, in my case, a few glasses of champagne.
It really, really was great fun. And of course, one of the other reasons we're here is that today, Monocle hits the newsstands. This is our April edition. Of course, the patrons will have already got it, but it goes everywhere else today. It's lovely. Paris, Tokyo style top 25. Fresh thinking for spring. Talk us through the mag this month.
Well, as you say, it's the Star Top 25. This is produced by Natalie Theodosi, who's our fashion director. We always try to do something with these surveys. Of course, we're going to recommend a good jacket and maybe a nice shirt maker. But what her prism over the issue is she also tries to look at the business behind all of these companies, tries to show that the trends are also about industry and about how we live, and make the cultural connections as well. So she's done an extraordinary job of that. We have an essay section on a special trimmed-in piece of paper that we've put in the issue as well. And there's also an amazing story which leads our affairs pages, which is looking at the role that dogs play in airport security in the US. And it's by Tom Vanderbilt, who's a regular writer for us, an American writer, and they went to the TSA to see how they train these dogs. So there's some amazing pictures of dogs, but also what's funny is when you start your training, you have essentially a stuffed toy to begin your training with. So they have some rather nice, as you can see here, some rather nice stuffed version.
They're very real looking, aren't they?
Yeah. So
I think it's time though, Andrew, isn't it, for us to produce a Monocle dog jacket?
Well, we did a collar back in the day, but I think that, seeing as I'm an owner of a pooch, I think that would be a fine thing to do. And just one last thing that Lexelf and Chris Lord and everybody worked with our Turkey correspondent actually to go back to Syria. So she flew from Istanbul to Damascus with many returning Syrians and followed their journey as they try to set up businesses and, along with many Turkish investors, try and get this country going. So all the tough things that are going on there, but still finding this note of optimism in this very difficult place in the world. So what a range from style and fashion all the way through to contemplative essays and this amazing piece of photo reportage.
And that goes on sale today. And just speaking about that region and this space, there is a connection because, of course, this space hasn't been entirely kitted out by a Lebanese company.
So Cannes Architects, that's K-A-N-N, not Cannes in the south of France. They were commissioned to design our shop and cafe here on Rue Bachemont. And they have done like the most impeccable job. But what's fascinating is that they work with an atelier that's near Byblos in Lebanon, and they ship back to France the designs, and then they fit it. It's like kit almost. They put it in place. The measurements are unbelievable because it just all snapped into place, and suddenly we had this wonderful premises. So yeah, and the great, just one last thing. So come to see us in Rue Bachemont, because this morning it's just so lovely being in the cafe at 8 o'clock. Already regulars in, sitting down, reading their paper, reading the magazine. And I don't know, we're also seeing quite a lot of guests coming from last night who are kind of popping in to say hello. So
yeah, absolutely. It's wonderful to see them this morning and clear-headed.
Yes.
Andrew, thank you very much indeed. Now, still to come on the programme.
Hong Kong's enduring position as an international capital for culture is more evident than ever. Art Basel has a vital role not only as a global platform for buying and selling art, but as a connector, opportunity accelerator for key players in the region.
We'll hear all about Art Basel, and we'll also speak with the French entrepreneur, a Parisian DJ, about nightlife. This is The Globalist.
UBS has over 900 investment analysts from over 100 different countries.
Over 900 of the sharpest minds and freshest thinkers in the world of finance today.
To find out how we could help you,
contact us at ubs.com.
It's 8:20 here in Paris. I'm Georgina Godwin, and joining me in the studio is Monocle's Paris Bureau Chief, Simon Bouvier. Good morning to you, Simon. Now, of course, the big story in town today is Zelensky. He's here at the moment, gave a big press conference yesterday, widely reported across the papers. What's Le Figaro's take?
Absolutely. Well, the Figaro's front page is dominated by a photo of Zelensky. They had an exclusive interview with him. The headline reads, "Our victory will be to not belong to Russia and its worldview." As Francis was saying earlier, Zelensky, especially since that Oval Office incident, is very careful. So there's nothing really extremely shocking in that interview, but he does press European leaders to be specific about the kinds of security guarantees that they want to provide, and he insists that Ukraine will not concede any of the territory that Russia has occupied, and that stopping the war is stopping Putin.
And I mean, as I guess as Francis was saying earlier, though, that may not be a possibility. That land may have gone.
Yes, I think he's taking a more traditional approach to these negotiations than the one that the new American administration has, which is to say, let's start the negotiations by negotiating what is currently non-negotiable. Making the non-negotiable negotiable is the first step. I think the Trump administration kind of skipped that part, and so it's understandable that Zelensky is making all these public pronouncements. As you say, and as Francis said, the reality on the ground is that it's going to be a bit difficult, according to many experts, to mount a comeback and retake or force Russia to cede back these territories.
And across the coverage of Zelensky's visit here, I mean, it's largely sympathetic in the French papers.
Absolutely. I think he's quite popular, and except on the political fringes, he's quite admired. I think people admire his poise and the fact that he was thrust into this situation from previously being essentially a TV comic, and now he's a kind of a wartime president facing an existential crisis. So I think there's widespread admiration in Europe for him. There was even before the kind of American side of this equation started to be more hostile to his interests. So yes, I think the coverage is widely positive.
Now, of course, one thing he really wants is help with defence. He needs weapons, and here in France, there is a bit of a problem with the supply chain.
Absolutely. There's a fascinating article in Les Echos about defense contractors. The headline reads, "Defense subcontractors are facing the risk of a growth crisis." Essentially, what they're breaking down in this article is that France has big defense companies that are leaders in their field, but for their components, they rely on archipelago of subcontractors, over 4,000 small and medium businesses that are squeezed between this increased demand by these big defense firms saying we need you to produce far more parts. Well, that requires investment on the part of these small and medium businesses that don't necessarily have access to the funds that they need in order to ramp up their production lines, hire people. The personnel is also a big issue. And one thing that is also haunting these small and medium businesses involved in defense is paying back COVID-era loans. There was a big nationwide economic slowdown, and the government famously supported many small businesses by giving them loans, but there weren't handouts. They have to pay them back, and not paying those back it makes it more difficult for them to access credit and build up their capabilities. So Les Echos identified these 4,000 subcontractors as a kind of serious potential bottleneck if we don't do anything in France to address that.
And what can be done, though?
Well, I think making it easier for them to access credit, for example, saying, we're not going to hold it against you if you haven't yet reimbursed all of these COVID-era loans. That would be a good start. Mobilizing, as the government has done, a lot of the private sector, banks, private equity to kind of support this national domestic push towards fostering these defense companies. But it's a very tricky balancing act because, as you know, Georgina, we're in a period where the public finances of this country are a bit out of control. And now we find ourselves in a situation where it's like, well, in order to meet these strategic objectives, we're going to have to find the money somewhere. So I don't envy the Prime Minister.
So from public finance to public spaces, the Paris mayor has announced the winning project to green and pedestrianize the Place de la Concorde.
Well, yes, she's going to announce it today, actually. She has announced previously the 5 finalists. She started a commission 5 years ago saying this is our objective, to green and pedestrianize what is essentially, at the moment and has been for years, a giant intersection. We want to make it essentially in the image of her time at Paris City Hall, a park, the opposite of what it is now. No cars, only greenery and pedestrians. And today we'll learn which of the 5 finalists have been trusted to carry out this project.
And do we know what any of it looks like?
Well, there are some renders online. I think, once we know the winner later today, when she announces it at a press conference, we will have more renders from the winning bid to give it a bit more specificity. But at this point, considering the kind of gargantuan nature of this task, it's going to be a bit of smoke and mirrors for now, and we'll have to see how it actually turns out.
There's another beautification project going on, this time with a metro.
Yes, I think this was another, funny article in Le Parisien. The headline is, "The ugliest metro station in Paris is set to get a makeover." The station in question is La Fourche on line 13 in the 17th arrondissement. And it was modernized in the 1960s after a bus hit its kind of original 1911, classic Parisian green fencing, the classic Parisian aspect of a metro station. It was modernized, but residents have complained for years that the new one kind of looks like a bunker and is very ugly. And there's a mechanism in Paris that allows citizens of specific arrondissements to choose where the city hall of that specific arrondissement, because there's the main one that controls the government of the city of Paris as a whole, but each arrondissement has its own city hall. And each city hall every year asks its citizens or its residents, where do you want to spend a portion of our budget? And a number of projects are put forward, and this modernization was one of the winning ones, even though it's going to cost 700,000 euros.
Wow, a lot of money.
Yes, and the idea is to restore it to its 1911 original aspect.
Simon, thank you very much indeed. That's Simon Bouvier there. Now, here's what else we're keeping an eye on today. The The editor of The Atlantic magazine has shared the full transcript of the messages he received as part of a military group chat of senior White House officials. Jeffrey Goldberg shared the chats from the Signal Group on the Atlantic website, including real-time updates from US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth on airstrikes on Houthi targets in Yemen earlier this month. US President Donald Trump has ramped up his global trade war by announcing 25% tariffs on all auto imports into the United States. Charges on imported cars will begin on the 2nd of April, with levies on car parts to commence as soon as May. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said taxes were bad for businesses and worse for consumers. And Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is expected to announce a federal election tomorrow. If he does, the potential dates for polling are May the 3rd, 10th and 17th. The Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet posted on X that the government was in caretaker mode, which happens once an election has been called. The post was quickly deleted. This is The Globalist. Stay tuned. Now it's time for one of the other stories across our radar. Today, Art Basel Hong Kong 2025 begins. Here's Monocle's Lucrezia Motta with what you can expect.
Art Basel Hong Kong kicked off yesterday with 242 galleries from 42 countries and territories, half of which from the Asia-Pacific region, exhibiting through till Sunday. Art Basel Hong Kong director Angel Seung-Lei told the Monocle Minute that Hong Kong's enduring position as an international capital for culture is more evident than ever. Art Basel has a vital role not only as a global platform for buying and selling art, but as a connector, opportunity accelerator for key players in the region. Although this year has been marked by pressures due to economic downturns in China and growing competition in Seoul and Tokyo, the city's status as the market's Asian hub endures. In this regard, the fair's competitors are aiding this allure. For the first time, big auction houses such as Christie's and Sotheby's are holding spring sales of modern and contemporary art on the 28th and 29th of March, concurrently with the fair. In the last few years, several international auction houses have opened dedicated spaces on the island, along with new cultural institutions like the M+ Museum. With a flourishing art scene on one side and buyers with high expectations on the other, this 12th edition has its work cut out for it.
That was Lucrezia Motta, and for more from Monocle's editors and correspondents around the world, do sign up to our free daily newsletter, The Monocle Minute, at monocle.com/minute. Now, once upon a time, to get ahead in business, one would study for an MBA. But now, that's not necessarily the only way. Ariel Renou is co-founder and CEO of Augment, a platform offering business education from real entrepreneurs who've actually built companies. And he joins me now. Hi, welcome.
Well, thank you so much.
Tell me about the genesis of this idea. How did it come about?
So we started Augment with my co-founder Roy 2.5 years ago. We went to business school here in Paris at what is supposed to be the #1 business school in France, and we ended up being quite disappointed with the education, and in particular the fact that we knew we wanted to become entrepreneurs, and the content did not fit what we wanted to do in the sense that it prepares you to become a consultant, to work in finance or in big corporate, but not really to start your own company.
So how does your model work?
And so after graduation, we were like, okay, let's try to reinvent the MBA experience for entrepreneurs. And this is Augment. So we're building a new type of MBA program that's designed to fit into the lives of people who work. So you complete it approximately in 6 months. It takes between 15 and 30 minutes a day. And basically, you get a real, super practical business lesson from the world's greatest entrepreneurs.
That's a brilliant idea. I mean, is there a problem in that MBA is a kind of currency out there, and if you've gone to a really great university, then that's like you can wave that around, is it?
And it's still true, in my opinion. It's still true, and it's still quite valuable. The thing is that there are less than 1% of the population who can access these schools, pay those high fees, take 2 years off, etc. And so, how can you reimagine the business education system for the 99.9% of the population who cannot access it?
Yeah. I wonder if we could just unpick the evolution of your company, the process of going from business school to building it to the point you are now. How did you get here?
So the first thing we did after graduating, so it was in the midst of COVID, so it was a weird period of time. But the first thing we did, and this is quite unconventional, we directly managed to raise a $2 million seed round. We had this very, very big vision. We were going to build the MBA program for the rest of the population, the 99%. And so we've been super lucky to be backed by some of the greatest funds in both Europe and the US. And basically, we raised $2 million. Then I remember exactly we were with Roy over summer. We didn't know where to start. We felt completely lost. And we sent a lot of cold emails to a lot of people in Silicon Valley. Of course, we have no network there. One day we woke up, one email from Chris Barton, the founder of Shazam, who agreed to be the first Augment faculty member and to teach a first class on Augment. He was like, guys, this is interesting. Let's have dinner. And so we flew to San Francisco. We had dinner with him. He agreed to be part of the program. And from there, it all started.
Well, and you've got a number of high-profile partners. Who are they and what's their role?
So our courses are taught by some of the greatest entrepreneurs and executives on the planet, and we're talking about Steve Chen, the founder of YouTube. We've got Jimmy Wales, the founder of Wikipedia. I was just mentioning Chris Barton, the founder of Shazam. We've got the founder of Waze, the founder of Lime, the founder of Eventbrite, and also some top executives. We have the Google chief of staff, Anne. We've got Jeff Bezos' right hand at Amazon, who were filming last week in Paris with a former OpenAI director. The course is going to come up soon. So basically, the idea is quite simple. Learn business from the best.
And so how do people access that? They go on an app?
Exactly. So there is an online platform. You can access on your phone, on your app, on your iPad. And basically, similar to an MBA program, there are two big parts of the Augment experience. The first part is content, and the other one is community. And so in addition to the courses that you can access anytime, anywhere, on any device, we also host live events with top founders, authors, executives, but also in-person meetups. So we had one in New York last week for the Augment community. Next week is in Los Angeles. The one after is San Diego. The one after is in London. So basically, we're trying to replicate the MBA experience for most people.
Mm-hmm. And what is the take-up? Are people jumping on this? Are they doing it? And what kind of people are they?
So it's quite interesting. The people who take the program, they're actually very successful professionals in their late 30s, 40s, 50s, who have very strong careers but don't necessarily have a business education. And just this morning I was chatting with one Augment student. He's an airplane pilot. So very smart guy, obviously very technical, but no business education whatsoever. We have a lot of doctors, a lot of architects, a lot of dentists, a lot of technical people, designers, software engineers, who basically are excellent at what they do, but lack basically the fundamental business knowledge. And we're talking about finance, accounting, leadership, management, sales, entrepreneurship, innovation. And so basically what these people will not take 2 years off to go back to school. Most of them have families, they have very, very strong positions, but they still need to get some business skills to reach the next step in their career.
Fascinating. Really great idea. So what do you think is the future then of business education?
So it's quite interesting. I believe that the top schools are here to stay. We're not going to replace Harvard or Stanford. But what's for sure is that we need to build a business education that fits into the life of people who work and basically the majority of the population, and something even more important, that practical, especially in a world where things are moving so fast. Basically, we try to update the curriculum every time. This is why we're filming the AI module last week, because the business world is evolving so fast. And so, yeah, I believe the future is to more practicality, closer to reality. We're past this time where we were teaching outdated frameworks, theories, reading textbooks. I believe now it's all based on case studies, real companies, because things are just moving too fast.
What do your lecturers from your MBA think about it?
They love it, and this is why they take part in this program. You know, if you teach at Augment, you're probably beyond the money, beyond the fame, and you do what you do because you resonate with the mission, because you want to help people, because you want to transmit your knowledge. And so they of course love that.
Ariel, thank you so much. That's Ariel Renoud there, and this is Monocle Radio. It is 8:41 in Paris, 7:41 in London. Now, the music industry here in France is thriving, but among the top echelons of high-earning and high-recognition DJs, there are very few women. That's changing, and one of the people making that happen is DJ Anaïs Condado. She started a non-profit for professionals in electronic music called Reinvent the Night. Anaïs, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Tell me about your career in music first. How did you start?
Well, I started about when I was 19 years old. I was in France studying. I'm from Spain, half Spanish, half French. And I basically decided to buy some turntables, decks, and started DJing on my own. And it's funny because at the time, everyone was asking me if my boyfriend was teaching me how to DJ. And I was like, no, I'm learning on my own.
Extraordinary. So you learned to do it, and then?
And then basically I started a career in music as a production manager. And so I always had this DJ career and music, backstage career, doing production, doing booking. And I ended up running La Machine du Moulin Rouge in artistic direction. And when
that's the home of the world-famous cabaret. I mean, it's been running for, 125 years?
130, more than 130 years, and basically they have this concert and club venue called La Machine that has been around for 15 years, and basically I run it for 2.5 years in programming.
So now, Reinvent the Night. What is it, and why particularly is it necessary?
Reinvent the Night is a non-profit that we started with 6 other DJs after something that happened to our friend Paloma Colombi in a club, where she suffered basically violence from the audience, from a member of the staff, and like sexist violence and harassment. And basically she did a post on Instagram that went viral. And after that we said, it was 2023 at the time, and we were kind of like, this cannot happen anymore. We are in 2023, and we had COVID. We kind of rethinked the way we want to do clubs, and this is still happening. So we wrote a manifest for a safer profession to be recognized as professional. Basically, when you're a DJ, you are in your work environment, and you should be treated with respect. And of course, the fact that you're in a club environment can sometimes blur the frontier between fun and work. And so we wanted to do a statement for that and do some actions. So we started Reinvent the Night that focus on, promoting this vision, a more inclusive, safer profession. So it's basically by DJs and professionals and for DJs and professionals.
And you even got a psychologist involved.
Yes, basically every month we organize these talking circles, talking groups, where it's for gender minorities and women. And we have a psychologist that leads a group where we kind of share the experiences that we have with music, with sexism, and it creates this sorority and this space of it's care, it's sharing and caring, and we feel so empowered for it because we don't feel alone anymore in our experiences, and we kind of structure ourselves to change things, I would say.
How can you police that kind of behavior in clubs?
Basically, for Rethink the Night, Reinventer la Nuit, Reinvent the Night, we released protocols. So basically, you go to our web, you can download a free protocol in French, in English, for promoters, even for artists to include in their contracts. So it's basically how you should treat an artist from the moment they arrive to your club to the moment they leave and they arrive to their home. Because sometimes violence can happen in the entry of the club because the bouncer doesn't believe that you're the DJ, or maybe in the taxi way home. So yeah, we do have those experiences. So we have these protocols. And you can download them, and you can contact us if you want more resources. And basically, but I would say the most important thing is that artists should be aware of their rights and should be aware of what is normal and not normal. So we share these riders that you can download as well, and you have this, safety policy that if you suffer violence from a member of the club, a member of the audience, you should be allowed to just take your USBs out or your vinyl and get out of the venue and be paid.
And I understand another thing that you do is you collect data.
Yes, we are working on a study that's going to be released in June. We're going to present it at Nuit Sonore, which is a very big festival, electronic music festival in France. And it's exploratory study and qualitative. So we're basically trying to analyze where the violence and the sexism and the harassment comes from, in which environment does it occur, and how to prevent it. So we're going to release this study, and we're working with another nonprofit called Konfekt, which is also going to release a study on general violence and harassment in clubs, more focused on audience numbers, but they do have numbers for professionals.
And the other side of it, of course, is promoting women, making sure that women are actually out there and doing these jobs. How do you do that?
So we basically promote this with the Turkish circles, as I was saying, and also the fact that on our resources we have like templates of riders, contracts, where if you are a small artist and you don't have a professional environment and structure yet, you can download these and kind of know what should be done when you arrive. And we have the goal in a few months to start these residencies where young DJs that haven't played in a club professionally yet can put themselves in a professional environment. So we want to rent, a club daytime, but put themselves in night situations, like with lights, with the smoke, with everything, and kind of putting up a lineup of, where they can train to do that. Because training and working on that is how you get, comfortable.
How would you describe the music scene in Paris?
Music scene in Paris right now is interesting because there is new spaces opening. For example, Essin, it's a 400 capacity club that just opened between Gare du Nord and Gare de l'Est. And it's a very interesting space because it's really focused on inclusivity and curation, and it's really minimalistic and about the music. So basically they would put the DJs for 4-hour sets, which doesn't happen that much in our scene anymore. And also we're kind of getting into institutional recognition, which wasn't the case. You have this border and breach in Paris between like West clubs and East clubs, where like geographically speaking, the West clubs are more focused on like are more business approach. They will sell bottles and they have like VIP spaces and don't really focus on the musical programming. They would have like resident DJs, whereas all these club cultures like La Machine Moulin Rouge, Essin, Badaboom, Virage are doing lineups. They're programming international artists, and so basically Rachida Dati, our Minister of Culture, just released this club culture label where our club scene is going to be recognized by the states, which wasn't the case before.
And what about technology, specifically, I suppose, AI? How is that changing what you do?
Well, for now, we don't feel it as much. Like it's more composer and producers that are going to work with films or publicity that is impacted. Our scene is not yet that much impacted by AI technology, but it will, just in terms of producing music, for example.
Now, earlier on, we heard a little snippet of a track of yours. Can you just tell us about that?
Yeah, of course. So I'm releasing my first track next April 17th on a record label called Love in the Ends. And the track is called Give Me Bass, and it's kind of techno and footwork with Latin and reggaeton-inspired sounds. So it's kind of the compilation I'm releasing. It's going to be 10 tracks putting forward the French scene and the Spanish scene, as I'm both from both countries, and focused on global culture and how the sounds of the diaspora influence the electronic music today in Europe.
That's interesting. So in terms of diaspora, are you just talking about within this continent or people coming from, I don't know, Africa, etc.?
Yeah, definitely. For example, now we have a huge impact of Latin American music and the Latin club and Latin core sound that is very, very much present in Europe. And we see that we have a lot of influence from more traditional sounds and, yeah.
Excellent. Well, listen, to play you out, I think we're just going to hear a little clip of that track once again. Anais Condado, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
This is The Globalist on Monocle Radio.
UBS is a global financial services firm with over 150 years of heritage. Built on the unique dedication of our people, we bring fresh thinking and perspective to our work. We know that it takes a marriage of intelligence and heart to create lasting value for our clients. It's about having the right ideas, of course, but also about having one of the most accomplished systems and an unrivaled network of global experts. That's why at UBS, we pride ourselves on thinking smarter to make a real difference. Tune in to The Bulletin with UBS every week for the latest insights and opinions from UBS all around the world.
Now, not only is the April issue of Monocle out now, but our sister publication, Konfekt, has just published the spring edition. Sophie Grove is the editor of Konfekt, and she joins me now in the Paris studio, looking amazing. Sophie, I am particularly surprised because it was a late night.
It was. We had yet another lovely party here at Rue Bachemont, and it was just such a dreamy evening with our patrons talking about plans for the future. There's so much going on in the next couple of months. I think people's eyes were a bit wide when I was telling them about my diary coming up, but it was a really delightful evening.
Yeah. Now, this new edition, it's very much design focused, and that's quite relevant here because this is beautifully designed, this space, isn't it?
It is. I think it's really a testament to some of the values that we have in Monocle and Konfekt. This idea that design is very tactile. It's about the senses. It's about feeling that sense of home, that sense of warmth. And I think that humanity that that is at the root of design is very expressed in this space, but also in the issue of Konfekt. I think that's a thread that runs through it. There's a lot of beautiful architecture and craft, and very warm interiors with collections. I think there's a real sense that, you know, the things that people are surrounding themselves with have that sense of memory, have that sense of meaning. And one of the pieces in here which I loved the most was a flat I went to in Palma, Mallorca, just a beautiful translator, Martha Salis, and she has this beautiful 1957 flat. It used to be a hotel, so it has that really kind of wonderful mid-century kind of moment of the holidays. But then she just had she had 3,000 books, incredible collections of cutlery and beautiful sort of crockery for all around Britain, but also Spain and Italy. And we talked for literally hours about these things, and she cherishes every single thing and uses every single thing.
You were talking about your busy diary, and I know that Salone de Meuble is coming up. So tell us about that.
It is, and this issue is something of a preview, because we have a beautiful piece about Carla Cesani, who's a Milanese kind of doyenne, really. She started Corso Como, and we're rambling around Milan with her, and she takes us to Gio Ponti churches and different little moments. But it's also just a moment to reflect on Milan, just on the cusp of Salone. There's so many things happening, and what's really remarkable about how the diary is kind of looking for the very beginning of April is just how many fashion brands are there. So what's really changed about Salone is, you know, Hermès will be there, amazing installations by Gucci, symposiums by Prada, reflecting on the idea of home, again, emotion. There's a real sense that fashion is kind of joining forces with design even more frequently. And I think it's really expressed in this issue. We shot our beautiful fashion in Hyères, in a beautiful kind of Art Deco villa built by Robert Mallet Stevens. We're trying to kind of connect those dots. And I think more generally in the industry, that's happening too.
There's also a piece about Senegal and fashion.
There is. It's a really amazing piece written by Chiara Ramella, the deputy editor. Khadija Bar is one of this very remarkable artisans, fashion designer, based in Dakar. She's been working with Chanel. She's done an incredible collection with Goussin, but she's also this kind of maven. She goes around looking for swatches of beautifully crafted fabrics, amazing sort of artisans in corners of the market. She's making shoes, and the piece is very much a sort of urban road trip, sort of bombing around Dakar, meeting her muses, her friends, her sort of milieu of artists, going to her shop and really getting under her skin, you know, this creative lens. It's really a window into that, but also the wider scene in Dakar, what's happening in fashion and how it's just being galvanized at the moment.
It's wonderful, isn't it? Finally, I wonder if you could tell us about this sonic project.
Well, it's interesting because also we're limbering up for the Biennale in Venice in May, and we thought we'd preview that with a round table on the subject of the senses, but primarily sound in architecture. So we invited 5 women, actually. They turned out to be a poet, a couple of architects and designers, to talk about sound in society, but also in architecture, in rooms, in interiors. And it's really just this deep dive into how sometimes we've overlooked the idea that sound is one of the most important things in a room. And it goes back again to that sense of humanity. Can you even hear the person next to you in a restaurant? And how are we augmenting sound in society with buildings, with data centres as a whole interesting sort of bit of this. It's about the Anthropocene, this idea that we've created these noises that animals can hear, that we can't, humming and buzzings and those things that finally, they seem like gripes, but actually there's fundamental issues there.
Sophie, thank you so much. So Konfekt, a design special, architecture, craft and interiors, is out now, as is the brand new April edition of Monocle magazine. Sophie Grove, thank you. And that's all we have time for on today's programme. Thanks very much to our producers Anita Riotta, to Chris Chermak and Tom Webb in London, Simon Bouvier and Lorraine Libera in Paris. You've been fantastic. Thank you, Suan. Our researcher Francesca Gilks and our studio manager Elliot Greenfield. Loved meeting everybody here. After the headlines, there's more music on the way, and The Globalist returns at the same time tomorrow.